Good evening, everyone. Welcome. So I am Mayor Rob Jacobowski.
Hi, Rob.
So one of my roles is I am the liaison to a number of organizations in town. One that I've committed a lot of time to, much to the volunteers' dismay, is sustainable. I tend to get to every sustainable meeting. If I can't, they certainly know what's happening and all that. So we do have some amazing volunteers. I thank them, and as you can see, I mean, one of them is a professional horticulturist. So before you start, I just do want to recognize a couple people in the audience, my friends, but also colleagues. Deputy County Commissioner Ed McDonald. And we have a tendency around the county, we always point out Audubon connections to anyone we find. Commissioner McDonald did teach in Audubon. We said 4 years, 4 years.
I
So
know for about 4 years, yeah. Long time ago.
And he did help hire Don Morden as president way back when. So, and Don's also an Audubon resident. And sitting next to him is the Deputy County Administrator, Jim Rhodes. So, I have to be nice to him. He is actually one of my bosses for my day job. So I gotta be nice to him. So, you don't want to hear from me anymore. Without any
You don't have
further
to be
ado,
that nice to us.
Aimee Bentley will talk to you about trees.
Yes. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm very excited to be here, and I just hope that we'll learn a little bit more about trees in our town, learn a little bit more about our town, and we'll leave a lot more excited about trees and planting trees. So let's talk trees. So we're going to do a brief introduction of myself, just to get to know me a little bit more. We're going to talk about the importance of shade trees in a community and some relevant facts about shade trees. We're going to talk about the tree canopy in our town, where it stands, and also how it relates to our neighboring communities. We're going to talk about what tree to plant where and how to ensure successful planting and long-term success of that tree. And then we're going to talk about the Audubon Shade Tree Initiative. So I am a proud Audubon resident since 2012, and I am a self-proclaimed tree hugger. I've hugged many trees, and I plan on hugging many more. I have a BS degree in ornamental horticulture and environmental design. More recently, I've got some certifications as a certified crop advisor and a nutrient management consultant in the tri-state area. I am a current member of the Camden County Agriculture Development Board, and I worked in landscape industry for 15 years, and currently for the past 7 years have worked in sustainable agriculture. And as of 2022, just about a year ago, I joined Sustainable Audubon, and that's why we're all here this evening. And just a little bit of background on what brought me here. About this time last year, I was working from home for a period of time, and I just heard an abundance of noises in the form of chainsaws and tree chippers, and I just kept thinking, what is happening? It sounds like a lot of trees are being removed. Are they being replaced? What are we doing about that? And I guess what really was just the boiling point for me was waking up one morning to my next door neighbor's sycamore tree being cut down off the curb strip. Perfectly healthy tree by the utility company. And I just said at that point I need to take action. I need to find out, educate myself a little bit more about our town and what we're doing, what's in place, and I need a voice for these trees that are an asset to our community, and they obviously can't speak for themselves. And so that's what brought me to Sustainable Audubon. So let's talk about the importance of trees in our community. If we look at the benefits, environmentally speaking, they decrease stormwater runoff. So the rain's hitting those leaves, it's slowing down the impact onto the soil. It's decreasing that opportunity for erosion. We get a lot of fast and furious rain events nowadays, so it's to our benefit to try to increase the amount of trees we have that soak up that water, take it into the root system. Certainly remove air pollutants such as ozone and carbon monoxide. They take that in. As part of one of their main processes, they produce just a minor element called oxygen that we all need to breathe. So just a small factor that they contribute to. And they conserve energy. So a tree canopy near a house is going to cut down immensely on the sunlight going into the house, and it's going to show in a reduction in your energy bill. So from an economic standpoint, they increase property value. There's facts about that, and I know there's a realtor or two in the audience, so that can be a selling point in certain neighborhoods. They also increase value in commercial districts, so you get more for your goods in a tree-lined street. And there is a decrease in your average electric bill. So in conserving energy, you're paying less for your bill. From a social standpoint, we're getting a decrease in motor vehicle speed. There are studies that show tree-lined streets, you will have a decrease in overall speed. They certainly decrease street noise. They block a lot of that traffic and overall noise. We get streets that are more walkable, certainly more enjoyable to walk under a tree canopy in the heat of the summer as compared to one that's there's no trees and it's blazing hot. And they are aesthetically pleasing. So there's a lot of inorganic materials in our landscape. There's concrete, there's utility poles, there's signs, and trees really help to screen and deter and distract from that. So many more benefits we could list, but these are just some of the ones that I think as a community are important to us. There was an article written in July of 2021, and I remember reading through this article, and then as I was doing research for tonight, I found it online again, and really the author was doing a study in the city of Los Angeles, and what he was showing that was the direct correlation between tree canopies and urban inequity, and there is a direct correlation. So the wealthier towns, the wealthier parts of the city had tree-lined streets, and they were overall cooler in temperature. And then as you went south, the trees became less, and it got hotter. And so there's that direct correlation. So the wealthier communities had about an equal proportion for tree canopy and impermeable surface. And so that was grossly different in the poorer side of town. And so there was that direct correlation. So we're going to talk about some facts that I think as residents of a town should be very important to us. And so the U.S. Forest Service estimates that street trees next to a house that's being sold, that house will sell for about $13,000 more. Homes, goods, services sell for about 12% more in towns with street trees. Pavement causes temperatures to rise from 3 to 7 degrees. Having a tree there will cut that heat down and will decrease your bills by about 35%. That's huge. Wow. For a planting of a tree and maintenance of initial cost about $250 to $600, which is high. That's a high estimate. You're going to get about $90,000 in benefits from that tree, not including the social aspects or the environment. Well, I guess the environmental aspect you would, but the natural benefits of enjoying that tree are not even included in that. So how do we determine what our town is as far as tree canopy? Where do we start? So I found this website called iTree Canopy, and so it's essentially a tool that takes a given boundary, and you can either draw that given Google Maps, or there's one that are preset giving the area code that you delineate, and it gives you estimates given random sample points that it generates for you. And in addition to that, it gives a report of carbon dioxide, air pollution, stormwater impacts for that town, not just tree canopy, but all those other elements that make up the asset of a tree. So looking a little bit more at how it's used, the area gets outlined. So if you can see that outline in red, delineating a certain boundary. Within that boundary, iTree will generate, you see those little yellow sort of T's, they randomly generate that point and it zooms in, and the user then picks from a drop-down bar and chooses which coverage that is, whether it's grass, trees, impermeable surface, so pavement, walkway, roof. Could be water in the form of a river, a lake, a pool, swimming pool. And so the user chooses that. Now, so iTree suggests that the more points you enter manually, the more accurate your estimate will be. So they suggest anywhere from 500 to 1,000 points to gain some sort of accuracy. And so, relating this to our count, what I did was went in and drew, using iTree tools on Google Maps, Google Earth, and drew our boundaries and just started implementing points. And I thought I did 3,000, but clearly I did 2,990, so that's 3,000. But if you look at that photo in the top left, that's sort of an aerial view of all the points, the plots, pointed plots rather. And then on the right, it's sort of a zoomed in of one of those streets within the boundaries there. And so each color represents, and I'll show you a little, just more of a zoomed out view of our town. So here would be, is that Haddon Lake? Yeah. So the greens are going to be trees, herbaceous, lawn. The reds are no good, the blacks are no good, the browns are no good. So they're more like streets, roofs, they're impermeable surfaces. And then the blue would be water. So just going back to this, as you enter these points in iTree Canopy, it keeps generating a report, and you can access that report at any time. So at the 3,000 mark, we'll say 3,000, I generated a report, and what it said was our tree percent cover was at about 27%. And our impermeable, if we add these three, was about 47%. So I do want to say that at 2,000 I generated a report, and from 2,000 to 3,000 there was not a significant increase in percentages, so I felt comfortable stopping at 3,000. So what you'll see, so this was done, hand inputting all these 3,000 points. Now what this next slide will show is, this is iTree tool information, so this is giving us a comparison. So if you look on the left, this is where we rank as a county. And I know it's probably a little bit difficult to read, but we are 28 out of 37 with tree canopy. And it has us at just about 20%, because this is an estimate with no points plotted. And it has our impervious surface at 37%. So that went up as well with plotting the points more. Same thing with Haddonfield and Haddon Heights, their numbers probably go up as well if this was done for them. But as it stands, Haddonfield's at 41% tree canopy and 17% impervious. And Haddon Heights is at 30% tree canopy and 26% impervious. So what does this mean? So I think it means we have some work to do. I think it gives us a baseline of where we are and where we can be, and it gives us a starting point of how do we go about doing that? What's our goal? Do we increase by 5%, and in how many years do we do that? So that's where Sustainable Audubon comes in, and the Audubon Tree Initiative, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So thinking about what trees to plant and where, and this is concerning curb strips, the first step to really ensure that success is to think about a site analysis. So we're going to evaluate that area, and we're going to consider the following. We're going to look at overhead wires, lights, signs that could be in the way, and then we're going to look down and we're going to look at underground utilities. Are there, you can see usually the water caps, the sewer caps at the ground level. Also, more importantly, you have to call 1-800, I think it's called 1-800-DIG. It's free, they come out and they mark those utilities for you. All that needs to be done before you consider planting a tree. Very important is the width of the curb strip. That varies from street to street. And so that's one of the most important factors in my opinion as to what tree to plant. And that gets considered in the tree species selection as well. So another important factor I think gets overlooked sometimes is exposure to wind. So corner properties or just open areas. that get a lot of wind, that's going to make it more difficult to establish a tree. So wind desiccates tree limbs, desiccates leaves. So if we're trying to establish a tree, you're going to have to water that more, you're going to have to coddle it more in order to ensure that success. So we have to be aware of that. Light conditions during the day. So is it sunny? Is it shady? We need at least 4 hours of good sunlight, so midday on. The tree needs to photosynthesize to grow, to make its leaves, to produce oxygen. So let's set it up for success. Let's not put it in a shaded environment. What are the distance from the other trees, the surrounding tree canopies? If we plant, are we, in 10 years, is it going to be impeding that canopy? And then we're going to have to start unnecessarily pruning. So we have to think about that. And then the distance to nearby buildings. In our case, most likely houses. So as that tree grows, will it become a potential liability? When we think about selecting the tree species, we want to base on the local climate and utilizing native trees as much as possible. We have a landscape architect in the room that could probably talk a lot more about native trees, but the way I would define it is native to the northeastern United States. You could get even more specific and stay within a 100-mile radius of where you're planting that tree. I think we have a good baseline on what native trees work in our climate, and so that gives us a really good starting point. But utilizing them as much as you can is really key. Consider susceptibility to insect and disease, and that is also why planting native does help with that issue. But even so, there are native trees that have some issues, such as the oak wilt virus. So we know that there are certain oaks that are more susceptible than others, such as red oak. So we're not going to choose that. That's not going to be on the list. So let's not start off with something that we may have to remove and spend taxpayer money to get rid of. We need to think about the water needs of the tree. So any tree, I don't care if it's drought tolerant or not, needs 2 years of watering to get established. Established means it's put roots into the existing soil. After that, if it is drought tolerant, it will be drought tolerant, but before that, it is not. So we need to respect that and take care for that beforehand. And what kind of root system do these trees have? Is it deep? Is it tap-rooted? Is it shallow? Is it going to start carrying up a sidewalk in future years? Let's think about that now so we're not dealing with that issue later. And then I think, in my opinion, the most important aspect is utilizing information from our other municipalities. What are they doing that works? What do they have in place? They share their list. It's on their websites. Let's take pieces from them, talk to them, and learn, and come up with a list that works for us. So as far as the Audubon Shade Tree Initiative, this is organized by Sustainable Audubon. And what we've started out with is an outline of how to go about this project of increasing the amount of street trees. So as part of that outline, we started by gathering our street tree inventory. And so we did that with iTree, and we talked about that. So that's our baseline. That gives us goals of what we can do. Now, where we are right now is we're evaluating interest from residents, and that's why you're all here. So we're doing that in the form of a public meeting. We've been doing that in the form of door-to-door letters, and I know of one lady that's here because of that. And hopefully we're doing that maybe this spring and summer with in-person surveys at local events. But we want to gather interest. We want people who want trees, voluntarily, gladly want a tree. That's what we want. And we want to get that list, get a solid list, a foundation, and then we'll start analyzing the sites. So as I talked about with what we go about for site analysis, we go out and we say, this could work. We could have a tree here. And hopefully most of those people interested would have a site that would work. But that is an important aspect. We will provide a list of acceptable trees to work from. So trees not on that list do not get planted. So we have that. We're all on the same page as far as what trees get planted to ensure ultimate success. We'll also develop an after planting care sheet. just a little bit of education involved. So we want proper mulching to happen, and we want watering to happen, proper watering, gator bags, talk about when and how much, but that will be part of the process as well. And then I think possibly the most important part of this outline is future legislation. We don't want to start from square one every year or every time we want to plant trees. We want to set this ahead for future generations. So that could look like in the form of ordinances, establishing ordinances for any development that may occur in this town in the future. If they have to remove a tree, they either have to plant a tree that's sizable, or they have to put that money in a tree bank. And then that money can go to another tree in a different location in town. Something like that. Or future development has to include the planting of a certain number of trees, certain species, certain size. But no question about it, it has to happen. And then possibly, I'm sure Mayor Jacobowski doesn't love this last one, but incorporating a yearly budget for trees, committing to it. Audubon wants trees, and we're not backing down. We want trees. And we're showing that commitment by doing that. And we're not having to start from square one every time. And so perhaps that's the most important aspect. So, how do we get the money for this? It always comes down to money. So we came across this program on New Jersey trees, and it's called the Shovel Ready program. And some of the qualifications are you need 20 willing participants, at least 20. So 20 places at least where trees could be planted. And the parameters would be public space only. So for a homeowner, that would be a curb